There's a bloody revolution happening in Libya. As each day passes, it's clear that the people of Libya want an end to Colonel Gaddafi's brutal dictatorial reign. But Gaddafi has vowed to fight to the very last drop of his own blood. But who is this Colonel Gaddafi? Here now with his insights is an actual former guest of the madman himself. Here is internationally syndicated columnist Eric Margolis. Eric, it's a pleasure. Welcome to Freedom Watch.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. You actually, in your career as a journalist all over the globe, spent some time with him some years ago. I think you were actually inside his grand palatial tent and even had conversations about the various food that each of you was eating and clothes that you were wearing. Tell us a little bit about him. Was he ever a smart guy? Is he really a madman? Is he dumb like a fox?
Well, yeah, he's crazy like a fox. He came to power in 1969 in a coup, and he's ruled Libya ever since. He's the longest-serving, or one of the longest-serving rulers in the Middle East, in spite of attempts by at least 4 countries to kill him on repeated occasions. So he's not totally mad. He stayed in power. I spent a whole afternoon and evening with him in the bombed-out ruins of his palace. We saw that on TV the other day, which the U.S. had bombed in an attempt to kill him. I was with him in his tent out in the garden, and he's very odd. He's very eccentric. And to this day, I can't figure out how unstable and odd he is. But he also has a certain kind of crazy sense. And I've got to tell you that all the other Arab countries hate him, because Gaddafi was always calling them names. He called the Saudis fat old women in dresses.
Eric, let me ask you this. Did he pull a fast one on President Bush and Prime Minister Blair when he induced them to engage in some agreement whereby he would get rid of what they thought were nuclear weapons, and in reality it was just nuclear waste?
Yes, he did. It was very clever. Here he is being smart again. He bought this nuclear junk on the black market, said, okay, I'm going to turn it over to the U.S. and Britain. The Bush administration was thrilled because they said, look, the invasion of Iraq worked because now the Libyans are going nuclear free. But in fact, to this day, to get an elevator fixed in Libya, you have to bring in workers, technicians from Europe. They have absolutely zero technical capability. He never has made or delivered nuclear weapons.
Is Colonel Gaddafi capable of fighting to the last drop of his own blood, of slaughtering his own countrymen, or will he have the good sense, like Hosni Mubarak, to leave in the face of overwhelming odds against him?
He does not see himself as a head of state. He sees himself as a leader of a revolution. And he said he's not going to go. Secondly, he really doesn't have many places to go to now that he's being demonized everywhere. When you do something like this, you should always leave the guy an escape route if you want him to leave. We haven't. We've closed all his assets, frozen his assets, said he's going to be put on trial. So I'd say chances are he'll stay around, though he may also succumb to lead poisoning in the very near future.
Got it. Eric Margolis, it's a pleasure. We'll have you back again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke said today that if Republicans get their way on spending cuts, hundreds of thousands of people will lose their jobs. My freedom fighters are scratching their heads on that one, and they hash it out here next. Today is day 2 of Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke's hearings and testimony on Capitol Hill regarding monetary policy and America's economic health. He's cautiously optimistic, but he warns if Republicans get the $60 billion in cuts they want in federal spending, that will cause a loss of a couple 100,000 private sector jobs. Does this mean the GOP should abandon its $60 billion spending cut pursuit? I turn to my freedom fighters to answer this one. Joining me now are America's nightly scoreboard anchor and my colleague and dear friend, David Osmond, radio host Leslie Marshall, and associate editor of Reason Magazine, Peter Suderman. Peter, does the great professor from Princeton even understand basic economics if he thinks that by the government cutting spending, that's going to cost jobs? Won't that allow more money to remain in the private sector to create jobs?
Look, I think if you want to worry about jobs, you want to worry about the consequences of government spending that we can't afford, the consequences of propping up an economy on government debt. Look, I mean, we're going to have $1.6 trillion in our deficit this year. We're racking up $13 trillion in debt over the next 10 years. That's not sustainable. That's going to do huge damage to the economy, and we need to deal with it now.
Shouldn't we be cutting spending, Leslie, or should we be raising taxes, or should we just keep borrowing and printing money as Chairman Bernanke wants?
You know what, Judge? This is an area where people don't like to admit it, but both the left and the right agree that there need to be, and the left more on raising taxes, and the right and the left on spending. It's how much and where you cut. And obviously, do you raise the debt ceiling, which except for some of the Tea Party freshmen in the GOP, both the left and the right agree on. So I would say cuts, absolutely. Where the cuts are, and if you're going to eliminate over 700,000 jobs, as the numbers are coming out today, that's not an area in a wise decision in cutting from the GOP.
Today, in his back and forth with Chairman Bernanke, Congressman Ron Paul, whose knowledge of the monetary system is second to none and is deeply respected by you and me, basically said that the real cause of inflation, which is a deadly threat to us now, is the Federal Reserve.
That's what Milton Friedman said. He said there's only one institution, or actually two institutions that create inflation: the federal government and the central bank of that. There's so many ways in which Bernanke is doing harm. One, he is enabling government politicians to spend more money by buying up all of the debt that they are creating. And two, he is denigrating the value of the dollar, the most fundamental instrument by which we do commerce in this country.
Peter, I thought of you a little while ago because Congressman Paul was here, and he revealed to us some testimony which hasn't yet been made public, that basically Chairman Bernanke said, well, let's take energy and food out of the equation. There hasn't been much inflation. Let's see. Food has gone up 15%, and gasoline at the pump has gone up 30%. So what kind of sense does it make to say, let's take energy and food, two of our basic staples, out of the question and out of the equation, and crow that there has been no inflation?
Well, you know, it's not clear exactly how bad the inflation problem is, but what Bernanke has done isn't a recipe for making it any better. He's flooded the market with brand new sort of made-up money, $600 billion, quantitative easing, the QE2 program. That's what it was designed to do. He basically handed a lot of big banks a lot of brand new made-up money. So we put that much money into the system. I think at least there's always the potential anyway, for a lot of inflation.
It's not just inflation that affects consumers. Already businesses, Procter & Gamble had to pay twice $1 billion for commodities for their various products than they were planning to spend. So they spent already $500 million more than they were planning to because of inflation.
Do the big government folks fear inflation, Leslie, or would they rather there be inflation so that the government could pay its debt in cheaper dollars?
Well, I think some on the right would like inflation so they can just say, look, Bernanke is an idiot, and the left are bad guys, and let's blame Obama and the Democrats. We're the Antichrist. Come on. But obviously, but financially, Judge, I mean, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. That hurts us as a nation. That hurts the small and large business owners, not only here, but all of the nations that are dependent upon our dollar. I do agree with David. It happens on occasion that we do have to be concerned.
All right, I want to switch
we do have to be concerned about our dollar.
Got it. I want to switch gears. Congress avoided a shutdown today when it passed a spending measure to fund the government for the next 2 weeks. I think this is ridiculous, 2 weeks. But what about an even bigger concern that could pop up as early as next month, which is the United States reaching its $14.2 trillion debt cap? Could the fallout from reaching our debt ceiling be worse than anything a government shutdown might bring about?
You know, I've got a radical solution. Just get rid of the debt limit altogether. Let's not have anything. You're a judge. You don't have a law and then keep moving the law this way or that way or this. You have to have a law and stick to it. If you're not going to stick to it, forget about it. Don't have a debt ceiling at all. Allow the government to borrow any money it wants to borrow.
Are we so addicted to debt, Peter Suderman? Are we so in love with the Fed's printing press? I know now it's digital. They don't actually print cash anymore. That this will never change. That David Asman is right. That no matter what debt ceiling they agree on in April, it'll change in August.
Well, I think it has to change. I mean, look, you're right that historically we have basically just said we're just going to raise it whenever we get to the debt limit. The debt limit has been raised 10 times in the past decade. Democrats have done it. Republicans have done it. It's a bipartisan problem. But now it's a bipartisan problem that they're both going to have to solve. I mean, if you look at the long-term debt problem in America is really it's piling up. We've got $77 trillion in unfunded liabilities, $13 trillion in new debt that we're going to pile on in the next decade or so. Republicans and Democrats are going to have to come together and figure out a way to solve that, and I would like to see them start trying now.
Right. Leslie, I want to talk politics with you for a minute. Congressman Paul was here earlier. Congressman Chaffetz was here earlier. There are some serious Tea Party-supported, libertarian-leaning Republicans in the House of Representatives who are not going to vote to raise the debt ceiling no matter what. It is theoretically and mathematically possible a coalition of Democrats and Republicans could prevent the president from getting his majority in the House of Representatives and the debt ceiling doesn't go up. Question, do you think that these Tea Partiers will stick to their guns no matter what the economic consequences because they were sent to Washington to stop borrowing, period?
I think some of them will, but I don't think the majority of them will, because they are freshmen, Judge, and you know how it is to be the new kid on the block or on the hill. There are going to be some big players in the GOP that come in behind closed doors and talk about money that comes from the NRA, et cetera, in the next election cycle that may or may not go into their pockets if they're not going to play with their party.
Right.
But I think there will be some that are gutsy and have the backbone and, you know, stick to what they said and what they promised. I don't think they have the votes, though, Judge. I think the Democrats
and
Republicans
got about 30 seconds. How would a Senator Asman vote on raising debt ceiling?
Forget about it. You either get rid of it entirely or you don't keep changing the goalposts. If you have a game and you have a goalpost, you got to keep it there. What's the point of having a law that you continue to violate?
David Asman, Leslie Marshall, Peter Suderman, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Up next, the plane